Starting with watercolors, especially as a beginner, can be really confusing. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'll be sharing a few things that I wish I knew earlier that would have made my watercolor journey much better. Number 1. Choose the right paper. Most of the time, we fail to understand which is the right medium and which is the right paper that suits it. So this is my 200 GSM watercolor sketchbook that is meant specially for painting watercolors. This is another sketchbook from Zensangam that is specially for watercolors, about 240 GSM, and you can see the texture these papers have. Most of the times, all these watercolor papers from good quality brands are expensive, and sometimes we choose to compromise there. And that is the real problem. When you don't have the right paper for the right medium, your art doesn't come out or work out the way it is actually supposed to be. So choose watercolor papers with higher GSM. Second, add water to lighten colors. We have always been taught to add white to lighten colors, but in watercolors, the trick is to add water to lighten colors. I have picked up crimson here. The first box is directly the paint, and next I am mixing white with this color. So mixing white makes it look more pinkish and does not provide the lighter color of crimson. So I don't get a wash of crimson, rather I get a totally different color. Giving a wash of color on your drawing is one of the most important thing in watercolors when you start as the first layer. So when you give your wash, always remember to add water and not white to your paint. Third, work from light to dark. Watercolor paints are quite transparent and they needed to be worked in reverse. First apply the lighter color of paint and then add details using the darker color. So in this tree, I have added the lightest green first and I'm layering it with multiple shades of dark greens to create shadows. Light on dark literally becomes invisible once the painting dries. Number 4. Blend the colors while the paint is still wet and has water content in it. This helps to get a seamless blend and also helps avoid harsh edges. So for this example, I have picked up two colors, red and yellow, and I'm mixing them immediately as soon as I put the colors. So you can see that as I mix, the colors slowly blend together. Even when you're doing a wet on wet technique, I have put the base layer and I'm adding another color on top, and you can see how smooth and natural the spread of paint looks. Well, of course, if the paints have already dried, we can add water, reactivate it and blend them. But this increases the chances of getting hard edges and may not give a smooth blend because the water is excess in some part and maybe less in the other part while you blend. So always blend while the paint is still wet. Learn the wet on wet and wet on dry technique. So these are two important techniques in watercolor. Wet on wet is where the base layer is still wet, there is still water, and you apply another layer of paint on it. Whereas wet on dry is when the base layer has dried out and then you go ahead and paint on it. So when you do wet on dry, your paint doesn't spread and it is a very static painting. So there on top I have painted a couple of leaves and they are as such the way I have painted them. So when you do this, the exact shape of your painting is retained. Whereas in wet on wet technique, you apply fresh paint on a layer that has not yet dried. So this allows the paints to blend and spread together, merge with each other. Most of the times, this technique can be used to add multiple layers of paint and also create shadows. Next, not getting the right saturation of paint is always not your mistake. So this is a paint that I own that's by Jolly, and you would have seen me use this quite a lot in my paintings. I had one big issue with this which most of the people don't speak about is the saturation of the paint. I had thought it was my mistake to not get the right amount of color, but it was the manufacturing side of the paint. Few colors in this like violet and black lacked saturation and did not give that vibrant color even after multiple applications of paint, whereas few colors were really vibrant and beautiful. So sometimes paints are to be blamed. the most important one. Know the right water-paint ratio. I know watercolors are all about water and paint, but when you don't get the ratio of water and the paint right, it becomes really difficult to control the amount of paint that you're putting on the paper. So in this example, you can see that because the amount of water in my brush is more and the paint is less, I'm not getting definite strokes to paint this rose. Whereas when I have a right set of water, a right amount of water and right amount of paint, you can see I can get finer details while I paint, and I have more control on where my brush is going and what stroke I am painting. Learn to layer paints the right way. I know sometimes we got 10 minutes to paint or 15 minutes to paint and we are in such hurry and we don't have the patience to let the paint dry. But in case of watercolors, patience is the key. So here you see that I paint a layer, then I paint another layer, then I paint another layer, and everything is blending and becoming one messy blob of paint. Whereas when you let the paint dry, when you let one layer dry and then you paint your next color on it, it creates two different defined layers of paint. Doing this allows no space to unnecessary smudging of paints and helps create and add dimension to your painting. So in this simple landscape example, I have painted mountain ranges, and each range is of different color and they are well separated from each other. Whereas the top one is just mixture of all the colors into one single blob of paint. Rewetting your paper is fun. Again, this is something not many talk about. When I began watercolors, I was always scared to apply water on my previous layer as I feared it would smudge all the colors and it would look really messy. But it was very much lately I realized that it's not the case, and adding water to a dry layer does not actually spoil the previous layer. So here you can see I've painted a small galaxy. I've let the first layer dry and I've put water again on the second layer, and it does not spoil the previous layer, whereas it just helps you to add another layer of paint. Do not use whites from watercolors. Watercolor whites are usually transparent and literally dry out invisible. Use whites from gouache or acrylic medium for a vibrant look. Lastly, here is your bonus tip. When you begin, you don't need expensive paints, but you need to master the technique. These are some paints that you can begin with and later shift to paints like these. The paint can be any, but the technique remains the same. So master the technique before you jump into expensive paints. So that is all for this video, guys. I really hoped you gained more insights on how to begin with your watercolor journey, and also gained insights on what mistakes could be avoided and how to make your watercolor journey better. If you found this video useful, do not forget to like, share and subscribe for more such content from me. I'll see you all in the next one.